Good morning, everyone. My name is Joanna Smith-Vermani. I'm the co-executive director of the Aspen Institute Financial Security Program. Take a breath after that long name. Truly welcome. I said it was like a family reunion, but really it's just a thrill to be having this event, having it really in partnership and collaboration with other parts of Aspen, to show how diverse the sort of breadth of the way Aspen's leadership work really shows up in the country. Our work at Aspen is to support and provide the kind of knowledge and networks and really space for courage and bravery for leaders in our country to solve the most pressing challenges that we face. And including in that leadership for us are leaders who are experiencing the exact challenges that we are all trying to solve. And there is no possible way to solve those problems right and well and durably without actually being much more inclusive at our tables about who is driving understanding what the problem is, who's describing what the problem is, and who's coming up with the solutions, and we all have a part in that. And many of the programs of Aspen have really started building in this way we call person-centered practices. Other people call it other things, but I see a lot of my colleagues in the audience today to really institutionalize how we build that leadership and how we show that leadership. So it's just, I think I already said thrill, but it really is. It's been work we've been doing at the Financial Security Program for 4 or 5 years trying to build this up. And I couldn't be more proud of this part of our work and more excited to really showcase for the next couple of hours the different dimensions of how we think about person-centered work and really challenge everyone in this room and listening online to how do you build that into your work, whether you're a local organization, a state organization, or a national organization. To kick off the event, I am so delighted to have our CEO, Dan Porterfield, come open it up. I know this topic is not just meaningful for him, but it drives him in his work here at Aspen. So Dan, can I invite you to the stage to say some words?
Thank you, Joanna, and everybody who's joining today, and everybody online, the millions online. It's really cool to be here around for discussion and learning on this topic. And the Aspen Institute does a lot of work in the world. We're a global nonprofit. Our purpose is to ignite human potential for what? To build understanding and promote new possibilities for a better world. That's a big, encompassing mission, which is great because it provides space for lots of ways of working, for developing new ideas. And this idea about building understanding, that starts first, is really important. And a lot of the people in the world who, like me, would be like professional problem solvers. We've been trained to solve problems. The building understanding part, we so often shortcut because we think we know the answer. We're not even often addressing the right question, but we know the answer because we were trained. And so the building understanding, don't let that feel unimportant. That's actually the core, I believe. And in the building of understanding, everybody has a seat at the table, everybody has a perspective and experience to meld together to make something. So I really love that our mission. I'm very proud of it and all the different kinds of work we do. And there's various programs here that all, as Joanna said, have tried to absorb this notion of person-centered work and live it, and often coming out of personal background experience that led these colleagues to want to work in this way. And that's certainly true for me, and that's why I didn't sleep very well last night, because I was looking at, I had a chance to be here today, and I was thinking, this is the most important topic, the most important thing we could be talking through, always. And then it's like running through 60 years of life and thinking, what would I say in 2 minutes or 5 minutes that would be even, useful perhaps? And so the way I thought about this moment to say thank you to all of you was to just briefly touch on a couple of those extraordinary influences that I've had in my own life as I embarked upon trying to make a difference, and also try to develop myself, try to become a good, thoughtful citizen. And those influences are embodied in this work, and so it's almost a way of recognizing our work together by saying that some of those that shape how we think about the work are giants in the world. None of you know my mom, so she's the biggest giant. She grew up in foster care. She was a single mom. She raised 2 kids in Baltimore City. She got her BA at night in her 30s, and other good things happened to us as children because of her work, but also those that supported her, including systems that didn't only fail, although they didn't always succeed. She grew up in foster care, 15 years in foster care, and she came out of that like as ready to be a great parent. So one of those ideas is from the great Brazilian educator, I'm not going to be academic about this, but Paulo Freire, who wrote this book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. If you look at it online, it says over 27 million copies sold around the world now. And he had a lot of good ideas, but one I loved was the idea that the work of building learning experiences, and he was thinking of adult learning in Brazil, should be on what he called the problem-posing method. And he contrasted that with the banking method. The banking method is that somebody like me says, here's what you should know, and tries to stick it in your head like you're putting money in the bank. The problem-posing method is that we together frame what is the topic to work on with the people that are in the program, in the learning. It was a totally radical way of thinking about what educators are supposed to do. Pose problems for collective and, if you will, the adult students' shaping of the curriculum, as opposed to bring the curriculum and stick it in. So I think I read that when I was like 18 or 19 and working here in Washington, D.C., in different ways of working in the community. I was like, well, that's it. I still think about that, problem posing. Are we genuinely, as authentically problem posing? Because when you do, a lot of times, the problem you think you want to work on isn't the problem that the people want to work on. And so that is really rough, especially if the people that are framing what they think their problem should be are reproducing the dynamics of sort of powerlessness that exist anyway. So I think that's a big one for me. I hope I live up to the challenge that Paulo Freire gave us. So that was one. And then another one I thought about a lot was this idea. It's so elemental, but it's better to take an asset-based approach than a deficit-based approach when working with youth. And I got that from all sorts of thinkers on youth development when I was younger. Just take the asset-based approach. But people often don't know those assets. They think they know, or they might know, but they don't know. And so we start with the idea that people, communities, are there to create the work that's to be done. Then what are the assets brought by the community to do the work? And that's really incredibly important, actually, in community development. Because the other model, that's where you define the problem and you define the deficit in solving the problem, is just off. Then this other idea that's a little more of a recent one, a couple of years back now, Brian Stevens' idea of proximity. And we could be anybody, but let's say for a moment people that want to be helpers. Are we placing ourselves in authentic and genuine proximity with the people that we would like to think we can partner with to make a difference? I had, for me, one of the great experiences of proximity was teaching in prison, where I had the best students I ever had. They had this growth mindset that they were there to learn, even if the institution they were a part of was bent on their destruction. It was amazing. When they say prison's a college, which a lot of people say in prison, they actually mean just that. So, wow, what a powerful thing proximity is. Changes our lives. This isn't like a level of moral leadership. When I was working at Georgetown, I wanted to be on the campus as a faculty member. So our family moved into a dorm at Georgetown, lived there for 8 years. I had 3 little girls and my wife Karen and me, and so we really had proximity. Again, to all those different student things. And it's amazing how the institution, which I was a part of, didn't actually see the experience the students were having well enough. Like, an elevator is not broken, and so that might be like number 20 is broken. It might be number 27 on somebody's to-do list, except if you're in a wheelchair and you're sitting on the top of a building waiting for someone to carry you down, and being carried down is itself quite frustrating. So that idea of proximity is very challenging. You really can grow, though. It's a growth moment. It's a growth opportunity for all of us. So that one's, these are heroes, Brian Stevenson, Paulo Freire. And then I was really influenced by the Jesuits, who taught me in high school and in college, and they have all sorts of amazing philosophies I've learned from, but one of the ones that was really great was the idea of subsidiarity, which they meant, it's a big word, but what they meant is that put responsibility for problem solving as close to the issues as possible. That kind of runs counter to institutions and leaders of institutions thinking, well, I finally worked my way to the top, so I get to now say yes or no to the solutions. And so it's really about emptying power. It's about sharing power, distributing power, something else to live into. And then the one last one, and then I'll stop so you can get to the work. But I think that that the Jesuits also taught us this really profound lesson. We're just 18, 19-year-olds, so we're ready to learn. And they taught us that we were in relationship with everybody on the planet, even though we didn't know most of them. And if you think of it that way, that we're all each other's neighbors, each other's cousins, we're all in relationship. It just opens us up to a worldview that is, again, I hope, people-centered. Fred Riley's here. The Weave program is about that. It's about seeing ourselves in relationship as neighbors and partners, friends together. Even people we don't know, we're their friend, we're their allies. We're wanting the best. So those thoughts, because of you, I felt like last night I was lying in bed. My wife was like, "Why are you still awake?" It was 1 in the morning. I was like, "Well, I'm thinking about subsidiarity," and she's like, "Go into your study." Thank you so much for being here. This is the kind of topic that we will continue to work through together, all in society, not just the people in this room, all in society. And the beautiful thing about it is that these questions not only enhance the work we do, but help us grow in our understanding of one another and ourselves. So thank you for being here, and Joanna, way to go. All right, thank you.
You forgot to drop the mic there.
I know. I feel like, is there anything else for us to do? But there is, because we actually get to get our community advisory leaders, other leaders from other similar kinds of leadership opportunities on stage to really learn from their wisdom. But I have to say, I've worked at Aspen for almost 10 years, which is crazy. I'm in my 10th year. And I am deeply proud to work at this institute. And Dan, just really hearing you talk so thoughtfully and intentionally about how national institutions, there is an intention to do this work this way. There's a responsibility, an obligation, and an opportunity, right? And I just am grateful to be at a place that really embraces all leaders in this country and world. I think so domestically, but Dan is right, we're global. And I'm just so excited about today. So let's get into it. I want to invite Callie to the stage. And as my pal Callie, who we didn't even coordinate colors, but as you'll see, we're going to look hot on stage, comes to the stage. We have a Slido question that's supposed to be going up, and this is for everyone to practice our Slido to get both. We have a lot of people online and a good group of people in here in our office. And our question is, how familiar are you with these person-centered practices that we're talking about? And you may know them in different names and phrases, and all of them are right. It's just our language for today. And we will doing more questions throughout, so this is really just a way for you to practice Slido and get into it. And I want to see everyone's phone. This is the one time I will allow phones up. All right, great. Oops. This is on. Okay. Emmy, I shouldn't. Okay, good. It came on. Okay, so look at this, Callie. We've got like a half-see situation, right? Where some people are very familiar, some people have they need more. and they need more from you and me. I mean, really from you. I'm just going to facilitate us getting into it. And just really briefly, I said this in the beginning, but just to be even more specific about it, we started our community advisory group, our leaders, not all of whom are in the room, 5 of whom are in the room. Alana is home today watching. Hello, Alana, we miss you. After over a year of learning from other national organizations and programs at Aspen that are in the room today that were so generous with us about how you do this in a way that is not extractive, that is not transactional, that's not just about having people direct our work, but about actually sharing the leadership and power of the work. And then in 2021, we launched it, as I mentioned, with 6 leaders. It's been 3 years of really meaningful contributions, I think, that we've appreciated. I think Callie finally agrees. She'll tell you she was a skeptic to begin with. And we think of this leadership body at the Financial Security Program as telling us they know where to go and what to do, and they kind of give us our marching orders. Does that seem right?
Yes, that's right.
All right, so Callie, let you do a brief introduction of yourself, and then we've got 3 hot topics to get to, and then we're going to turn it over to your colleagues for the rest of the program.
Okay, great.
Okay, so introduce yourself.
Hello, how y'all doing? Hi, my name is Callie Greer. I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. I'm a community navigator organizer with Alabama Appleseed. I also do work with Poor People's Campaign, Crime Survivors for Speak for Justice, Mavis, Faith in Action, and a few other groups there. So, advocacy is what I do. And everything I advocate for, I have skin in the game. So, I don't have time for the games. I ain't got time for the other stuff. We're not going to be about the business. Don't waste my time and stuff like that. So, hey, how y'all doing? All right.
So you can imagine when we first met Callie during the pandemic, so it could only be online. And she's like, I don't have time for your nonsense. What is this about? We were kind of like, okay, we gotta figure out how we build trust in relationships because Callie's right. Tell me why you just, given all of that, and given that you already are an active advocate, why did you eventually decide that our community advisory group was essentially worth your time, and your time being so valuable and limited towards the goals you have in your life?
So, as I mentioned, I work with Alabama Appleseed under the leadership of Carla Crowder, and Leah Nelson was my supervisor. So Leah had done some fines and fees work and did a report about, it's called Afterwards, and I was a very big part of that before I was hired for Appleseed and after I was hired for Appleseed. And Leah was talking with people at Aspen about this work, and she had a perfect candidate. I didn't know she was volunteering me for stuff. I really didn't.
But you should have with Leah, because Leah, of course, is volunteering for stuff.
I didn't know it was me. I'm listening, and so it's me that she's volunteering. I'm like, okay, here we go again. But so after listening to the spiel of what we'll be doing, I must admit, like we were talking yesterday, following up for 3 years of this work, that at the beginning, like you said, Khadijah, what the hell are we doing? What are we doing here? So it was a lot of confusion in the beginning because it was so many different twists and turns and so many things that were being affected in our life by the work that we'd be doing that it was kind of like overwhelming. And once we did the courtship, the first year of courtship, and
Callie refers to us as dating.
Yeah, it's really a date. It's relationship building, and because of my trust for Leah, that she wouldn't steer me wrong, I agreed. Right, so the relationship building is in relationships for me. It's all so important because I ain't got time for you to be trying to play games with me and telling me this or that, and then I find out 6 months later that it wasn't that. Now I got to start all over again. Now I can't trust nothing you tell me. Now we got to start, So who got time for that? I'm in my 60s, man. Boy, bye. So, that kind of stuff.
Well, and also you talked with me about when we were prepping that it wasn't even just about wasting your time. It was kind of you're bringing along your community and sort of the risk there. Can you share a little bit about how you considered that?
Yeah, so the work I did with Appleseed, it sort of like cut out the middleman. You know, they were doing this very intimate research survey about like how did you find justice if you were called the police for a crime? Did you find justice afterwards? Well, after they came, did you receive justice for this crime that was committed against you? And surprisingly to them, and not to me, that maybe about 80%, 80+% of those people like no, and even more said, well, I didn't even report it because the people tend to group low wealth, underserved communities. It's all the same, and they tell you that there's this whole group of criminals over here in that community, then there's a whole other group of people in that community, which is truly false. Most of the people in the communities that I serve and I live in are both and. They've been have crimes committed against them, and they've committed crimes. So it's not this huge group of people. It's this group of people that they're on both sides of that deal, and they don't report them because when the police come, you call them and say, "Hey, I've been abducted, I've been raped, I've been beat, I've been robbed." They run your name, and then you have a warrant, and they arrest you. And the perpetrators got in the way. So a lot of times, that has a lot to do with the crime in communities too. We have to police ourselves. We have to find justice for ourselves. Sometimes it includes being violent to other people because we've been done wrong and we can't call y'all because y'all gonna come put us in jail. Who gonna take care of my children? All this other stuff. So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. We don't have enough time today, so I will talk with folks later on if they want to talk.
Well, right. I mean, just to say that what I hear you saying is there's a lot of considerations to joining something like this, because if you're talking about your community, you're trying to engage them in our work, you're putting your relationships with them at risk too. It's a vulnerable position.
It's true. See how I missed that? That's why I got this paper, y'all, because I'm old and I get carried away to something else. I didn't answer the question about, the community, right? So,
I think you answered it, but please answer more if you want.
So because I have a certain kind of, I have a certain relationship with my community because I live there, been living there all the time, have done all of the dirt and the good stuff in that same community. So I have to go back home. When I leave here tomorrow, I'll be going back to the community that I'm now talking to you about. So when I come in and tell them something about all these surveys we did, if I bring Aspen in or I bring Appleseed in, then Appleseed doesn't have to build that relationship. The relationship, they're riding on my relationship. Right? So y'all got to be right when you come. Right? Because I got to live here. Y'all going back to D.C. or wherever, I got to live here, and these people ain't playing about their business. So, yeah.
No, I really appreciate that honesty. I see a lot of nods from other folks in the group here. I want to ask you a little bit, given who is listening in this room and online. Hello, online friends. Hello, Callie's team down at Alabama Appleseed, one of the best organizations in the country. I love working with them. What do you said it was like a little rocky at first with us because we were learning too, and we were all really honest with each other, right? Like, as Ida, my co-executive director, always says, it's like just us chickens. We don't know what we're doing either. Or we're doing our best, I should say. Not that we don't know what we're doing. I don't want to say that in front of Dan or my funders.
Dan,
we know exactly what we're doing. We're a top-notch place to invest. But over time, we all did better together.
Yes.
And what is the kind of infrastructure and support you feel like, what's good advice to people about how to support this kind of leadership?
So with Aspen, with the work I'm doing with Aspen, how people say, we're going to invite folks to the table. They want to go in the community and invite people to the table. And then they invite you to the table, and everybody has silverware but you. And everybody else is eating but you. And I made this little statement up. It's on my email. It's like, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So I also would like to say you can be at the table and still be on the menu. Because if they invite you to the table and then tell you what it is you need to do, then you're on the menu. But with Aspen, when they invited us to the table, they gave us a menu. Said, okay, well, what do you want off the menu? What's the order for today? What's the order for this? And that was that's the person-centered approach. Ms. Rose and I have the same but different areas that we work in. So does me and Victor, so does me and Alana, and me and Ebony, and me and Khadijah. We all six of us, we're doing some work in our community that is both and. So I learned from them. So when I run up on those issues in my work, that I got an expert. I can call Ms. Rose. I can call Victor. I can call Khadijah. Khadijah's always out there in the world with those people with that podcast and things. So, and Miss Alana, she's always doing the portrait with the young folks. And Ms. Rose is everywhere. So I have assets as well. So when they order. When they place their order of what we're gonna do, then I'm also educated more in the work as well, right? So that's the person center. We steer the boat, and Aspen jump on and it's the ride, give us for the ride to see how this is done, how to go into other communities and do it.
Thank you.
Person centered.
And then last, because we only have a few more minutes left, but I've just been really moved by the work that you do in your community across so many different organizations, and kind of inspired about the more I have to do. And we are a leadership organization at Aspen, and I'm so curious, what is the legacy you want to leave for your family and community? You and I joked about, not joked, it's true, but on the phone when we were prepping that, the work we're all doing, and especially the work you're doing, you may not really reap the benefit of from a time perspective. This is generational work.
Yeah,
so I just love for you to share kind of your legacy goals and the impact you want to have in your community and in your life.
So, I've been doing this advocacy work now about 23 years, and I was thrust into it by the loss of our son to gun violence, and then again by our daughter to political murder. Both of them, Venus and Mercury, are both not with us anymore. And so being an angry black woman and having a voice and needing to do something about it and not being able to trust the powers to be to do it for me, I needed to be in that space myself. So I started doing the work in the community. And the legacy, I've been doing that work, I'm in my 60s. This financial security work that we're doing, like I stated several times, I even stated yesterday, I will not reap the benefit of what that retirement packet looks like. I've missed the part to do the baby bonds. So all of the work that I'm doing is going to benefit others. It's going to benefit my children, my grandchildren, your grandchildren. And the legacy I want to leave is that I want my children and grandchildren to see me, and they can go back to this and see me doing this work and knowing that I'm working for a better tomorrow for them. And that they don't latch on to the crap, that they fight the good fight, that they continue this work, because this work is going to be going for a long time, for a long, long time. And when Dan was talking, the first leader he lifted up was his mama. Yeah. And I was like, okay, so that's part of her legacy. I don't know if that, and I'm sure she wasn't planning it like that. So I want my children to be talking about their mama, me, Mama Callie Greer. My grandma fought for me to be able to get me have a baby bond. So when I get 18, I can have a little money to do a little something with. I ain't got to live in this pot. I want my children and your children to be talking about Mama Callie and how she used to cook them lemon pies and cakes and be in the kitchen and fun.
All the things.
All that. That's my legacy.
I love that, Callie. Thank you so much. And I also suspect other people in your neighbors, your community members are going to refer to you as Mama Callie and Grandma Callie for all the things that you did, not just your blood family. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for kicking off this conversation, getting us even more amped. Dan got us amped. Callie's gotten us amped. And now I'm going to invite Riani and other community leaders to the stage.
All right, thanks.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. So while Emmy and Talia, our amazing colleagues, help us set up the stage for the next panel, I'll just provide some opening remarks. I'm so excited to be here with all of you today. Thank you, Joanna and Callie, for starting us off so strong, and Dan for starting us off so strong today. My name is Riani Carr. I am a program associate with the Aspen Institute Financial Security Program team. And I have the honor of facilitating this next conversation. Ms. Rose, Marianne, and Jessica, if you want to make your way to the stage, I'll kind of continue my remarks. So Joanna already mentioned some of the work that our community advisory group has been doing with us. And over the past 3 years, I've had the privilege and the honor of getting to know and working closely with our CAG members. So Callie, Miss Rose, Victor, Kadisha, Ebony, and Alana. And throughout this week, our CAG community, our CAG family, is here commemorating the end of our 3rd year of engagement and impact. And I feel like in a lot of ways, we've done so much amazing work together, but at the same time, it feels like we're just scratching the surface. And as Ms. Rose reminded us in our time yesterday, it's heart work more than work. And really core to this person-centered and heart work is centering and being directed by lived experts themselves. So I'm so excited to be joined by Marianne Broxton, Jessica Jackson, and Rosalia Grillier, a group of dynamic and multifaceted leaders. So I'll join you on stage for this conversation. So, Marianne, let's start with you. Can you share a little bit about who you are as a leader, and talk a bit more about in the work that you've done, how have you seen how language really shapes connection and trust at the community level, and why it's so essential that we're interrogating how we're defining expertise and knowledge?
Sure, thank you. So my name is Marianne Broxton. I am the main representative for the international movement ATD Fourth World at the United Nations. And that's a mouthful. But basically I say I'm an activist. And the definition of activist, by the way we work, means a person with a direct experience of poverty, with lived experience of poverty. Because the worst thing that you could ever say, and I remind everybody at the UN, because they say it constantly, the poor. We work with the poor. No, because you're labeling people, and the minute you put a label on somebody, you objectify them, and it's easier to marginalize them, take away their dignity, their humanity, their rights, what they should be entitled to have access to, simply because they're a human being. So I am an activist. When we talk, that's how we talk about people that we work with, and we work with them in, as so many things I've heard so far this morning, is exactly the same things that what we do. We partner with community. And so even though I work at the UN, so it'll be international level, we are at all levels, grassroots, local, national, international. And the work that I do gets fed up through the chain, from grassroots, national to international, based on the people that we partner with. When I say we work with people in community, we live in the same neighborhoods, the volunteers. They live in the same neighborhoods. We work with people. We find out what their interests are. What do you care about? What do you need in your community that you think is lacking? Opposed to just parachuting in, talking to people, extracting the ideas, twisting them into what we think needs to be done, and then executing that program without people. Because if you work that way, it's doomed to fail from the beginning, because people in community aren't invested in it from the beginning. So the priorities that I work on, decent work and social protections, multidimensional poverty, gender issues, legal identity, all come from the ground level that people had concerns with, that we partnered with. And our way of working, and my way of working specifically, is just that. Because as I said, I have a direct experience of poverty. At the unicorn, I'm kind of like at the UN, I'm kind of like a unicorn. Very few people that do this position have a direct experience. Everybody, and I'm not, I have an education too, I have a degree, but the first thing, whenever you apply for a position of work, the first thing they ask you, what experience do you have? But we never consider that with people with the direct experience. Well, they should be having a degree to be able to do this type of work, you know? But you don't learn what you really need to know unless you are in the field working day by day with people alongside, but with them, to find out how programs work in actuality opposed to how they're supposed to work on paper. And I know, but language, I'm sorry, a lot of language. That's one of the things, how we talk to people, opposed to talking about people. Some of the things we say, people directly impacted by poverty, people experiencing homelessness or unhoused. I don't like to say disadvantaged communities. I like to say disinvested, because it's disadvantaged for a reason. I don't like to talk about minority groups. It's minoritized, because again, it's subject. We did the map research, and that's how we actually got to know Aspen. And one of the main dimensions that we talked about in poverty beyond monetary standing was subjugation. And everybody was like, oh, that's a little strong. Except for the people that we did the research with that had the direct experience was saying, it's not strong enough. You know, if we could go further, you know, you come up with a different word. That's the word we would use. Because the idea of some groups are worthy and some groups aren't. So that's why we say subjugation, we say disadvantaged, as far as because you were disinvested. You know, it's minoritized communities, not minority communities, because there's another actor involved. That's why I hate the word vulnerable populations, because again, there's other actors that have a hand in that make that happen to people. You know, it's just not a phenomenon that happens. So that's why language that we use and that we talk about with people is very, very important, and we should all be on the same page. I think you can say anything to anyone as far as the types of words that you use, as long as you make sure that we're all on the same page with it, because words are meant to be a bridge, not a barrier, you know? And as far as being on the same page, my organization is based in France, and in France, they don't say activists, they say militants. And I was like, oh, you can't say that word, you know? I'm like, in the US, that's a totally different context, you know? So I have them starting to say activists now. But when we went there and we were talking about the research, we were saying individuals experiencing poverty or homelessness, to distinguish between families. And the activists that were there were like, oh, you can't say that. You can't say individuals, because in the media, on the news, when they talk about people doing criminal activity, they say individuals. So that's why it's very important to be on the same page with people, to make sure we all understand the same point of language, and that we're not further objectifying people with the language we use or leaving them out, because you may say something and I may not understand it, but I may be afraid to ask you what you mean, because then maybe you'll question my intelligence. Should I be here? Did you make the right choice in choosing me to be here? And if I say I don't know what's going on, maybe you won't ask me to come back next time. So that's, I'm sorry, a lot at once.
No, that was perfect. Thank you, Marianne. And I think that gets to like core to so much of this work is relationships and building such a strong foundation. And so Jessica, I'd love to bring you into the conversation here as well. So tell us a bit about you and your leadership and your experiences, and in the work that you've done, what have you found to be kind of the core elements that help to create an interconnected and dynamic community of leaders? Yeah.
A pleasure to be here. The mic's not quite hot. Okay. I'm Jessica Jackson. I'm proud Detroiter. I say that because it means a lot to a lot of people, the negative images that you receive when you hear about the city of Detroit. I'm a lot of things, but more than anything, I'm a human, and I've been that my entire life. I am a certified nurse midwife. For many, many years, I'm much older than I look. A mother, a proud community leader and member, as well as I have the pleasure to be here and represent the Families and Workers Fund Essential Leadership Council. As the co-leader, I recently was elected and feel really proud of that. The work with FWF, you may hear me say throughout this talk, is directly rooted in ending poverty, as well as giving opportunities, not just jobs, to families and workers. But as I sit here as more so my 13 to 18-year-old self. If you can reflect on where you were at that time, the time of what you were doing. I was an adult, and I shared with people earlier, I was very much so an adult at that time. Now I'm so jovial and fun and come off very, very youthful as a choice, okay? But my 13 or 18-year-old self is sitting back in wonderment, and my present self, that I can even, this conversation is happening, and that I myself get to be a part of it. So I choose to be more human in my approach to this conversation. I'm a midwife. People, that's important now. TikTok is telling you about women's health things all the time. And I had the pleasure of supporting, in many ways, peer lactation consultants, peer doulas. And I reflect on the fact that my mom was this before there was a name here in the United States, because doula is ancestral, midwifery is ancestral. Black women were doing it before everyone. They are leaders in it, and still we die every day. And in my support of them, I have to recognize that just a year ago, Medicaid didn't cover doulas specifically. There was no way for them to receive a living wage. And now they may oftentimes get paid truly what they deserve. And that's a mind-blowing thing as a women's health provider, because I myself was an expert before I sat down in my first class at the University of Michigan, and I know that. I know that at 16 years old, when my church hired me to run a number of programs that adults didn't even do, and I got paid $77.48 every month to live my entire life, that I had no idea I would be sitting here with you guys. So I want to present value to my mother, as Dan did, that my mother was that doula before there was a name, a doula before there was respect, and a doula before there was money, that she advanced our community. She was an interpreter for patients, transportation. As some of you may know, immigrants cannot travel many times with safety. They have to many times be in a car with somebody who has a license or citizenship. But through that experience of her having 3 little human beings at her side, she was able to then be a peer doula, right? This is her lived experience, as we talk about lived experience. She had that. So I knew, I said, you know what, I want to do women's health, but what do I have to do to be respected? What do I have to do to escape poverty? This beautiful family, but no money whatsoever. I have to go get this degree that people said was necessary. And you know what, let me go get 3 degrees, just because, put a little sauce on it, make it really important. And I know that I was an expert before all of that was done, right? So what I would like to do is to stop being the only one who gets to have a conversation because I may present well or I may have a degree. I want to bring in so many people because I day to day get to say, oh my God, you would be totally a doctor. You would totally be the one in Senate if you had a voice, if you had resources. There's nothing different than you. My medical assistants who did trainings, but they have lived experience in the community. I look at them and I say, all that happened was you didn't get literacy training, as a child. You didn't have money to flow behind you. You could have easily not been a medical assistant. You could have been a doctor if we're talking about things that need degrees. So what I would like in this conversation is for us to understand the people from my community as well as others who have natural lived experience believe that they only have the crumbs of bread, perhaps even a slice, but never the loaf. Why can't they? Why do we choose to give people such a small portion of what's possible? So to answer your question in terms of dynamic, interconnected, innovative communities, I think what we need to do is understand that there's this intersection that we're missing, right? Sometimes we believe that we can give people money. Sometimes we believe that we can give people training. But sometimes we miss that crash course intersection that is the training, it is the money or other resources, and quite naturally, it's the acknowledgement or titles. Because without the acknowledgement or titles, the community doesn't value that person. And even though we can say in this idealistic room that that's unnecessary, it is. Because it's without the titles that you can't move freely through space, that people acknowledge you as someone. So I think it's the intersection of those three things. And the acknowledgement that every person is a leader, right? We can say that every person is an expert. It's kind of this lofty idea. But in terms of caring for and keeping communities and advancing communities, if people know that the individuals in those communities hold the exact cure, if you will, the exact thing that would change, why can't we harness these things? If we're able to harness those people and their expert skills, then we will not only survive, we'll thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. I've already cried once today with Callie. Tears of joy and gratitude, and I have a feeling I might cry again. So thank you for being vulnerable. Ms. Rose, I'd love to bring you into the conversation as well. Tell us about the many hats that you wear, your closet full of hats, and all of the work that you've done. And would love for you to share a bit more on, what are some of the impacts that you're most proud of your work having?
Wow. So good morning, afternoon. I'm not even sure what it is anymore. Beautiful people. You guys look wonderful. Thank you so much. But I just want to shout out again to that panel that went before us. You guys were amazing. So can we just give it up for them one more time? Yes. So I literally, actually wear a closet full of various hats because, as Khadijah reminded us again yesterday, which we all know, everything is connected. I mean, we choose to separate it and silo it and make each thing a different entity, but at the end of the day, it's all connected. And so I don't wear all of these hats because I'm a fashionista, but I wear them because it's absolutely necessary to connect those dots that have been broken apart if we're going to actually have success. And so in saying that, and Callie, I hear you, I have to reflect on my paper too. All this is in my heart and in my head, but I have to remind myself the order that it goes in. But so just thinking about, so both nationally and locally, we would say that. So locally, I sit on the Mayor's Women's Advisory Council. I am also on the Guaranteed Income Advisory Council. I'm also on this new venture that we're doing, co-governance, hoping that the city will share the power with the people that they're supposed to be there to serve. So I sit on that. And then I'm very proud of basically my starting point in advocacy and the folks who helped me identify that I was a leader and helped me understand how I want to operate in it. So now I am the chair of Kofi's board, Community Organized and Family Issues. Got a shout out to our executive director, Ellen, sitting over there. And the advocacy arm of that, which I'm most proud of, is all of those leaders who hadn't identified themselves as leaders, just as I was saying, oh, I'm just a parent, which is Power Pack Illinois. Parents Organized to Win, Educate and Renew Policy Action Council. We started out Chicago-based, and now we're across Illinois. However, we train folks all across the country in our model, helping people, again, identify that there's a leader in you. How do you want to navigate? How do you want to operate in that? But in addition to that, I'm on the board of NAFSCE, which is National Association for School, Family, and Community Engagement, which is important. I am also one of the founding members of UPlan, I try to break down acronyms because I'm like, what is United Parent Leaders Action Network, which is comprised of amazing parent-led organizations all across the country that are doing work in their various states, but they come together to also work on federal policy and make the change collectively and share and impart what's working here. How can we make it work there? And yada, yada, yada. And there's a whole lot of other hats I can name, but I can see that y'all like, what? Where is she? So I'll stop, but I'll say Google me. Look it up. and look to see that there's a whole nother list. But another one that I want to lift up is Funders for Family Leadership Advisory. And so with this entity, we know that everything takes money, right? And most of the people who have the problems don't have the money, or else they wouldn't have the problems. And so we're trying to develop relationships and an understanding with funders that, as opposed to you giving us a directive or a hoop to jump through and you give us a few dollars that we're fighting with a whole bunch of people to get, why not create real partnerships where we're both reaching our goals? The funder is achieving the goal that they want to achieve, and the people that they're funding are actually achieving something, not scrambling to just do something that looks okay on paper, but not actually having great outcomes. And so I lifted that in addition because I'm just so proud of the prospect. And then at the top of my list is Aspen K. Yeah, y'all. Which is this amazing group of folks that at the forefront of it is love. At the forefront of it is love. And with love brings true relationship and true partnership. And we come in the room and we talk about some real stuff, don't we? And what I love is that Aspen has provided the space, but also the climate, the atmosphere that says that we can tell the truth. Because I tell you what, I know y'all heard this before, but the truth not only sets us free, but it makes us better. But it's hard, right? The truth is hard. When you start telling the truth, they put me out of rooms. You know, when you start telling the truth, they don't want to see you come. They lock the door. Anybody ever watch Monk? They were hiding behind the counter. Nobody here. You know, that's what the truth gets you. Nevertheless, and that's my mindset, and that's why I go across the country with, nevertheless, whether I'm sick, I'm a stage 4 cancer survivor. I survived severe aortic stenosis. Fibromyalgia, still disrespectful, and you know, arthritis. All these, I got a whole list of things. But at the end of the day, it's the beginning of the day for advocacy. It's the beginning of the day for us to stand in the mirror and say, what can I do to change things? I could complain about a lot of things. I can lift up a lot of issues because there's a lot of issues, and I've experienced most of them, so I know. So person-centered is key, because you can read about me, but you can't feel what I've gone through in my life. Only I can do that. Only I can tell you the truth and the reality. You can get a snippet. They could write a paragraph. They can even write a book. But then beneath there was so many other things that you didn't get to digest that were experienced. And I can bring that to the table if you want real solutions, if you want real pathways to actually solve something, or we could just meet for the sake of meeting. A lot of people just meet for the sake of meeting. Because basically, I'm gonna tell you the truth, but and you know, I know they knew not to give me the microphone. But basically, the truth of the matter is there's enough data. There really is. There's been enough research. There really has. You've heard my story. And so many other stories, a million times, and they all lined up, and they all matched. You got quantitative, you got qualitative, you have everything that you actually need. My question becomes, what's really the problem? I might think implementation could be on the list somewhere, but when you bring the real people together and they actually strategize and you ask these questions and they give you truthful, profound answers, then my next question and my next ask and my next directive would be, now what are you going to do with it? And what are you going to do about it? And my hope is that you'll listen, you'll process, you'll come together, you'll bring whatever your piece of the puzzle is, and we'll put it there, and we will make that puzzle so fabulous and complete, and then we'll frame it.
Thank you, Ms. Rose. That was beautiful, and you see why we did give her the mic. Such a phenomenal leader. So let's get into more conversation on the panel, and kind of going back to something that you mentioned, Jessica, about kind of the power piece, and you know, at the center of this person-centered work is not only as we're thinking about power, is sharing power, and really kind of flipping that on its head. And so as we're thinking about community engagement, going beyond the surface level, you all are not just representatives of your communities, but you're leading professionals who are doing this work and working towards really meaningful change. So I'm curious to know, how have, in your experiences, how have other leaders or organizations poured into your leadership, and really interrogated and kind of flipped on its head how they share power?
Because I'm here. First and foremost, you know, we use the language of having a seat at the table, right? You could say it in so many different ways, but just my body being here, being listened to by others that may receive this message, curate something amazing for change, and then go enact that. But more than that, for me, as a person who has degrees and, okay, I can just do this midwife stuff, right? And I think about, as a 40-year-old, what do I want my life to look like? What do I want my stamp on the world to be? There's a certain level of professional development that needs to happen as we have these conversations about lived experience, as we have conversations of change. So I would say professional development, being able to dig, I mean, I've done grant writing, but to dig deeper into that, to know that there's importance behind being able to give your own bio. I think we did a training that was telling your own story, right? As you can see, I like to talk. But there's a more professional way to do that, to be received and things of that nature. I know my group, as the central leader, Leadership Council, are so dynamic, right? But we all have something to learn. And what's so beautiful is it's not just the wonderful Tianka that you'll see later talk, or Families and Workers Fund telling us what we need and how we should grow. It's them actually asking us, what do you want to do? What do you think you need to grow at? And then from there, the buck doesn't stop, right? FWF goes ahead and has a conversation with that said information. They come back, you say, hey, you know, you were saying this, what about this, this? Would you guys agree? We vote on it as a group, and then we actually start doing the development. Whereas, I don't know, in these decades, as I'm getting to this 5th decade, people will ask you, but they won't follow up. Or you get to one of the trainings, maybe, but to actually have that and at the end of it, be deemed professional at those things. The acknowledgement, the title, the label, it matters.
So I'll say, I thought you were direct. You guys can hear me without this mic. Oh no. Oh, you need it for. I'm sorry,
the virtual
online.
audience.
I love you. But you know, there's this saying that I've said for a number of years, and I hear everybody saying it now. The truth of the matter is, there should be absolutely nothing about us without us. How are you telling me what my neighborhood needs? And you've probably never been there. And even if you visited, you didn't stay long enough to get the essence of it. So keeping those thoughts in mind, everything you said, so I don't have to repeat it. Yes. And here's what I'll say about Aspen, and I know this wasn't the question, but Aspen they ask us, what is going to enhance your life? What are the things you want? And then the next thing you know, and they're pushy. Aspen is pushy. I'm sorry. But the next thing you know, hey, we've got this person that's going to work with you to help you on A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Those are the things that we long for in this journey. You know, don't just blow smoke. Oh, yeah. But ignite the fire in me and fan it when you have to. And you guys have done that, so I really appreciate and applaud that. But I think throughout this thing, we have to really understand. I mean, I really love the mentoring piece, where we're not pitting each other against one another for the sake of replacement, but we're actually being intentional about sharing the information, sharing the knowledge, so that they can take the next steps. So generationally, we shouldn't still be doing the stuff that we were doing in the 60s, because the stuff they did in the 60s should have been shared with the folks in the 70s to build toward the 80s, and then the folks toward the 80s should be at another level, and then 90s should have been at another level. We know COVID got in there and messed up some stuff, but even at that, 2024 should be bringing some new conversations that were built off of the older successes. But what we do is we keep starting over again and over again and over again. And I think somebody in one of them dictionaries described that as insanity.
All right, thank you, Ms. Rose. Marian, would you like to add on?
Sure. So the one thing I would say about leadership, people have talked about it already today, about it, like, you know, if you're not invited to the table, bring your own chair. If you're not on the menu, or if you are the menu type of thing. I always like to say that once you get to the table, you can't be the centerpiece. You know, something pretty that everybody looks at but talks around and over, and maybe we'll let you give your 5 minutes, you know, to say that you were there, but then now we're gonna have our conversation. If you have people doing this work, don't be afraid to let them speak. I was very lucky. I've always been an activist, and I've been involved with ATD for about 12 years, almost 13 years now, but I had a champion, my coworker, Guillaume. No matter what it was, if it was an invitation to speak, no, Marianne goes and does that. Or go be on this, Marianne goes and do that. Be a champion for people that you see, if they get that spark. They can be a leader. I see something in them. They have a voice. They know what they're talking about. They need opportunity, you know? The way I look at my job at the UN, I go there, I represent ATD and talk about our priority. That's my title job that I tell people what I do. My main job is to bring people, to make sure that, because I say that we create space like this for people to talk, discover, share the ideas, make the plan of attack for the issue, and then to share that space that I have access to with them, that people might not have access to, and to come to that space. And because I can sit there, and yes, I have my own direct experience of poverty, so I can talk about issues, but I don't know the issues in your community. I don't know the issues facing doulas and midwives and everything that you just. My job is to bring you there. And that's the task for everybody here too, is to make sure that you bring people and that they're part of the conversation and that they're listened to. And again, the centerpiece at the table, when it comes time for questions and answers, thank you, but I would really like to hear what this person has to say to answer that question. Not me, because you see my title and that you don't see my past history. You know, let's make sure that the people that are here, that should be in the room, that have the answers, that have been overlooked or ignored or like placated. Oh, that's nice. That's a nice. Now we're gonna work. Now the experts are going to work on it. No, make sure that they're listened to, they're involved. One thing about leadership too is how you pick your agenda. You know, like I said, I had a champion that's why I got this job. I had an opportunity to speak on a panel. Surprise, I'll tell you this little story real quick. I was speaking on a panel, the only person with the direct experience, the last person to speak. We all had 10 minutes. The person that spoke first went for 23. Then the next person did 15. The next person did 15. I started speaking. They slid a note down to me. We're running out of time. So I picked it up and I'm like, you know, thank you. And I said, I just want you to know, they're asking to wrap it up. I am the only person on this panel with the direct experience of poverty. Thank you for sharing your space with me and allowing me to be here. And I went on for another 10 minutes, because there's always never have the person that needs to speak the most, that people need to hear from, be the last person. Because everybody is going to take their time, fill up space. Whenever I invite people to speak, I tell them, you take your space. I don't care if you're last. You make sure you get to say what you came there to say, and you say more. And that's a quality of leadership that everybody here in this room should have, to make sure that the person the best person qualified to speak, do it. To make sure that they take up that space, that they're given that opportunity to take up that space and be listened to and be heard and offer input. So that's what I think is the best part of leadership, to recognize it in people. Someone saw it in me. I try to recognize it in other people and give them that opportunity. Because, it's not, you're supposed to take people with you. If you have this great opportunity and this chance, share it. Share your space, share your time together and everything, because it shouldn't be just one person. It should be together collectively as a group, and that's how we solve things. So that's my recommendation for leadership.
Thank you, Marianne.
Rihanna, if I could just add a little bit. Oh, come on, awesome human beings. I just wanted to tie that idea back to the idea of the loaf of bread. That it's not just community members. I myself and many people in the Families Workers Fund, Essential Leadership Council, other boards and amount councils, when you're getting paid to do something, you almost don't believe it, right? So I'm a whole, I hate to reiterate it, but I'm a whole professional human being. And when I was asked to speak on my lived experience, I thought it was fake. So I have to do the 1098 for every little job and consultant or whatever. So I remember getting for the first org that I was on where I was getting paid, getting that and not doing it. Because I was like, is this a scam? Right? Because all we're doing is talking about our lived experience, right? And because I'm quite boisterous and like to lean in, I messaged our director and I said, I just want to say that I'm uncomfortable with this because it makes me feel like it's not real. And this is where the birth of the loaf of bread idea came from, because I was trying to explain it to that person, right? That you think that you can have just a little piece. Why would you pay me to talk like this when I was 13 and nobody cared, right? So then to be asked to be a part of FWF's Essential Leadership Council and to be respected so much and have this seat and to be able to have this whole loaf of bread in terms of this conversation, it's unimaginable. So as people go out and do this work, I want you to know that the people that you're asking to do something, the people that you're asking to create this change, don't even think that it's possible. Don't even think that you asking them is reality, because it's been lived day in and day out and nobody cares and nobody's listening, and that's the way it feels. Please remind them of that value. Please pay them appropriately. Please pay them appropriately for their time. And please do not offer them a crumb or a slice and think that is sufficient. It's not. And because of being poured into, that goes back to leadership. It goes back to, how do you pour into me? Tianka? The idea that this is the way it's supposed to be, that this is true and you're safe and you're fine. You have to make sure people feel safe before they're able to have this conversation with you. And that is something that many people who are at the helm of this work do not understand. They do not understand not feeling safe to move around space, not just a seat at the table. I don't even feel comfortable walking in this building. I don't even feel comfortable describing what this institution is. There's so many barriers that you have to break down before you even get to hearing their voice and their lived experience and how they would like to create change. Remember that. Make people feel safe. Pay people well. And tell them that it's true, because they won't believe you.
I know we're running short on time, but let's talk a little bit about one of the things we haven't touched on, and that's respect. Which, you know, for everyone who went to university and all the letters, dots, and numbers behind your name, I applaud you. It's brilliant. But I also want to remind you that everyone didn't have that opportunity. That's not how their life was rolled out. And it's not their fault, always. Sometimes, but not always. There are other things we haven't considered. Nonetheless, they are human beings. Nonetheless, they deserve respect. And you may say, I have a doctorate or this or that, and that is wonderful, because that takes hard work and perseverance, and however you got it, whether it was handed to you or whether you struggled and starved yourself just to make your tuition payments, or however that happened. I want to remind you that folks who live these things, these issues, these experiences that we're talking about, they have a PhD in it. Woo. Because it is it's the fabric. It's their everyday. It is what they live every day. And I'm going to tell you something. You can give me something to read in the book and I can learn it, and maybe I can't memorize it now because my memory's shot. But it is not the same as every day of my life. It is my rehearsal. It's my verbiage. It's my breakfast, my lunch, my dinner. So we need to start respecting that on a level and not make it secondary. That seat at the table, you didn't give it to me. I earned it. I went through all the sugar, honey, iced tea that you could never go through to get it. Y'all can figure those acronyms out later. That's one acronym I will not break down today. But just thinking about that, how communities survive and thrive through all of these things. They're figuring it out. And it feels like every time they figure it out, you figure out a way to take away what they figured out. And I want to say one last thing that's just going to bring it right home for me. I don't remember because I wasn't born then, but I was told that once upon a time, chitlins was the trash that they threw out because it was the one thing that they weren't going to eat. It was garbage. And we took it and made it into a delicacy. Okay? $30 is the cost for a package this size right now. Now, y'all think about that a little while. Marinate it, put it in a saucepan, stir it around, stir fry it, put it on that platter, put some hot sauce, some jalapenos, whatever you like, ketchup on it, and you tell me what kind of predication that smells like.
Ms. Rose, thank you so much. We're closing in on our time, which is so unfortunate. But luckily, we have a whole networking lunch for our in-person folks, and so really encourage you all to continue engaging with all three of these amazing women. And so just to close us out, I'll take us to our next slide for our audience engagement question. We're really curious after this conversation, what is one of the things that you're taking away from this discussion that we've had? And what are one of the things that inspires you? And so as you continue reflecting and pondering on that question, I'll transition us to our next panel, and I'll invite my colleague Tim Shaw on the stage. But first, please join me in giving a thunderous round of applause to our panelists.
Hi, everyone. While folks are filling out that poll, my team knows that in these settings, it's not very often that I don't have words to describe a situation, but I really don't have words to describe how proud I am that we have these brilliant and inspiring leaders on stage, and that we're able to put them on this stage that happens too rarely, and invest deeply in their leadership. I think there's an experience of being in rooms like this, that as we start to build them over time, where this can feel obvious to the folks that we are gathering here. As Dan said, go to the people who are experiencing the problem and let them tell you the problem you should be working on. That feels like, how could you do it any differently? But I think also every one of us who has done this work, who leaves this room, knows that's not how the rest of the world operates. That's not how institutions of power operate. And I think it's worth remembering that there's a reason for that. We recently held a leadership forum on how to transform our benefit system to actually work in a person-centered way to support the financial security of everyone. And one of the leaders that got on stage has committed his life and all of the work of his institution to teaching folks how to build benefit systems in a user-centered way. Because he thinks, and I agree, that is the way you transform the system. But the thing he reminded us from that stage was, if you choose to do that, that is a radical departure from the way we do business in every facet of life, and every facet of the way that our institutions of power do work then. And when you embark on that change, then a lot of people get threatened. There's a lot of work that has to go into it. There's a lot of resistance to doing the type of work and making the types of changes that we are talking about here today. And if we're going to get over that hump, if we're going to get over that resistance and show other folks and bring other folks into this glorious room that we've built about what it means to do person-centered work, that takes investment. That takes courage. That takes investment of time. That takes giving the appropriate recognition and titles that Jessica was talking about on the last panel. And it takes, if we can be direct about it, it takes money. It takes actually paying people. It takes teaching folks like us at the Aspen Institute how to do that work correctly, how to fundamentally reshape what we've done for so long, and how to operate in a person-centered way and really bring those voices in to partner with us on what the work it is we ought to be doing. And so I am delighted to be able to facilitate this next panel with a set of folks who have worked, and if you could come to the stage, with a set of folks who have worked very directly on building up those systems and how we invest in all the ways we need to make that happen. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Erin Courier, Dina Imam, Sarah Hates, and Tianka Perkins-Ramawi for our next conversation. So we want to kick off once my mic kicks in. There we go. Folks online, hi. I'm glad you can hear us. I want to kick off if each of you could introduce yourself and start with just what brings you to this work and why does your organization do this work and why are you personally committed to it? We can start with you.
Is this on? Oh, great. So hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Dina Imam with the Annie Casey Foundation, and I just want to say what an honor it was to follow that last panel. I feel like I'm still I was incredibly moved and still really taking a lot of it in. And so I want to start off by saying two things. So the first is that, when I hear person-centered practice, I'm really thinking about it in the context of my work in our Center for Economic Opportunity and the young people we care about most. So we're really thinking about, young people ages 16 to 29, young people who've been connected to public systems, so child welfare, juvenile justice, young people who've experienced homelessness, young workers, young parents, young people who may be disconnected from school and work. And so from there, so I joined Casey about 6 years ago, and I was brought on to manage the Learn and Earn to Achieve Potential initiative, which is an initiative at Casey that's designed to support young people with systems experience to connect to supportive career and education pathways. And youth and young adult engagement was core to that work from the beginning. So for example, when we were recruiting grantee partnerships, we had young people with lived experience traveling with foundation staff to vet sites. Youth engagement capacity was a core sort of selection criteria for our grantees. And so it really was kind of baked into the fabric of the work that we were doing. But I was brought in to sort of help amplify and try to think of more ways that we could engage young people. So I was tasked with starting a LEAP Youth Fellowship that brought one young person who was nominated from their grantee organization to be part of, what we would describe as sort of an implementation steering committee to help us think about sort of our activities and implementation, but also, their own leadership development and professional development experience. How are we thinking about shaping an experience that's aligned with their own ambitions for themselves? And so, for example, some of the things that we did, we supported their, those with interest in research to connect with our evaluators, MDRC and Equal Measure, to learn about evaluation and to participate in a YPAR process. We also provided young people who are interested in deepening their leadership in their communities with small grants to develop, fund, as well as technical assistance to launch community-based projects. And so, all that to say, I'm certainly not sitting up here saying that I have all the answers with respect to how to do this work and to do it well, but that it's something that we're really committed to learning about and continuing to do. And so it's a real pleasure to be here and to be able to share.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tianka Perkins Ramawi, and I'm a program director with the Families and Workers Fund. We are a group of funders who came together and pooled our dollars to create a $125 million fund that focuses on upwardly mobile jobs and making public benefits easier to access and deliver. And bottom line, I'm here because we believe people with lived experience are experts. And we do this work because it's right and because it's effective. It's right because people with lived experience know what's best for themselves and their families, just like you and I do. And it's effective because, I think it was Ms. Rose who said it, it brings this work from theory and research and academics to reality. And that's what we're trying to do is real work. And I'm going to be very honest up here today. The reason why I'm personally committed to this work is because of my own lived experience. Watching my hero, my mother, who is a student teacher, trying to make ends meet, jump through hoops to try to get crumbs, as Jessica said, when she needed to make ends meet for her family until her full-time teaching job started. She could have told you exactly what she needed. She could have told you all the gaps and barriers, all the red tape that needed to be removed. And so that's why I do this work, because no one can tell you better than someone who's been through it. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that more people like me are in this field
and that their expertise is valued in dollars and cents and in high impact opportunities like this.
Hi, I'm Sarah Haight. I'm the director of 2Gen Practice at Ascend at the Aspen Institute, and it's such an honor to be up here with each of you and with colleague programs. We don't have an opportunity to collaborate this way as often as we'd like, and I'm just really grateful for the space. So personally, I come to this work as a clinical social worker. So prior to joining Ascend, I worked as a therapist in New York City, primarily with mothers of color who were justice involved and had been court mandated to therapy in order to reunify with their kids more quickly. And I realized, second day, third day, just how deeply racism is baked into the systems that purport to serve the families that I was seeing every day. And especially as a white woman social worker, the ways in which I might be complicit in perpetuating some of these systems based on my own education, my own experiences. And I felt very strongly that even at the best, on my best days, there were ways in which the systems were not actually recognizing the strengths and resilience of families who walked in those doors. And so in 2011, I was super lucky to meet Ann Mosley, who is here. And Ann founded Ascend early in 2011, really with a vision for 3 things that could influence policy and systems change. That you need best practice, you need data and research, and you need parent and family voice. And that wasn't just a nice thing to add on, it had to be integrated in everything that we did. And I think that third piece of our theory of change, parent and family voice, is really the beating heart of the way in which we do policy and systems change. And it shows up in a few different ways. The first is that we have had about 130 parent advisors over the course of the last decade who have worked closely with Ascend to advise not just on our convening design and policy recommendations, but to really say, here's how you can demonstrate and model for other organizations that don't work in direct service, how to authentically listen to and change practice based on family voice. The second way is in our Ascend Fellowship. So we have a cohort of leaders across the country. And one of our criteria for fellows as we select them is how are you centering family voice and creating practices to truly change what you're doing based on what you hear. And then we have a national network. It started with 58 organizations. It's now nearly 600 organizations around the country. United Ways, Goodwills, community action agencies, community colleges, Head Starts. With all of them, we say, how are you listening to families and how are you changing what you do based on what you hear? And I'll talk a little bit later about the guide that we've developed based on some of those strategies that we've had.
Hello, everyone. I'm Erin Courier. I'm with the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and I just want to echo my deep appreciation of being able to be in this space with so many incredible leaders. The foundation's goals are around the health and well-being of children, and our North Star is that every community would be an equitable place of opportunity. Embedded in everything we do is what we call our organizational DNA. That's racial equity, community engagement, and leadership. And those values stem directly from our founder, Will Keith Kellogg, who believed in the power of community self-determination. And we take all of our cues from him and what he wanted his philanthropy to stand for. Our work focuses on driving resources, supports, tools, data, to build the voice and capacity of local leaders and to engage multi-sector stakeholders to come together to co-create and implement solutions. I think for me, a really big reason that I resonate with this work is that I love policy and government, and I believe that our institutions can support equity, can support the public good. But in order for them to do that, they have to actually engage the public part of the public good. And the best way to support children and families is to actually ask them what they need to be supported.
Thank you all. Erin, I want to stick with you to get a little deeper about exactly what you said. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the foundation invests in person-centered practices more directly, both for grantees and in yourselves, and how you do business and how you choose those projects to invest in.
Absolutely. So we have as a foundation a set of core strategies. That's the how of the work. Sorry, that's the what of the work. The how, though, is that DNA, really thinking about how do we think about racial equity, community-centered work, leadership development, and those ideas are really interconnected and intersectional. So for example, we support work around driving pipelines of teachers of color, leaders of color into school systems. You can see how that would align to our racial equity goals, certainly racial leadership development, but also our hope is that that work is equipping the leaders of the future to engage within their communities to problem solve. When we think about our grantees, Ms. Rose actually gave like a really good sort of play-by-play of a lot of the organizations that we fund that she's engaged with. Many of our grantees are rooting the actual strategic plan for their organization in people-centered work, in what we would call community engagement. It's core to what they do, whether that's power building or narrative change and storytelling or educating policymakers, but it's also around how they actually make decisions about their own organizational priorities. So I'll give you an example. I had a conversation years ago now with a nationally facing organization. We were discussing a bill that we were hoping would be debated by Congress and would have really big impact for working families. And I was saying to the executive director of this organization, what are you going to compromise on? Like, we know that it's going to come down to compromise. How are you going to make a decision about that? What's acceptable and what's not acceptable? What's the organization's thought? And she said to me, oh, well, we won't make that choice. Our worker advisory board will make that choice and we'll follow their lead. And that is it. That is authentic, true partnership, not just checking a box, but recognizing that we are all in this together. And to me, that was really, really profound. I would say, too, within the foundation, we try really hard to practice what we preach, and we think a lot about what community engagement looks like within our own staff, within our own initiatives, when we're thinking about refining policies or strategies for the foundation. And I will say, too, that years ago, we engaged in a deep human-centered design process to operationalize our DNA across the whole foundation. We had one team, they spent more than 5 months. They interviewed probably more than 60 staff, all said and done, and engaged in this lengthy process of really understanding how were all of the different departments at the foundation thinking about and operationalizing our DNA. What did they understand? How were they already integrating it into their work? Where were there spaces that they needed more support, maybe learning? And staff participated in design sessions and lifted questions and were critical, right? That's what we need. We need the truth. We need the honesty. And what has come out then is a set of practices and standards that we have as a whole staff that we can refer to over and over again and get support from each other. It's baked into everything that we do, and it was rooted in a human-centered approach.
Thank you, Erin. Tianka, I want to turn to you. I mean, we've heard a lot already about why you all do this work and the work that Jessica and the conversations that you all have. I wonder if you get a little bit more specific also about how the Essential Leaders Council guides your work and how you embed it in everyday practice.
I just do whatever Jessica says. No, but seriously, we work with our Essential Leaders Council the same way that we work with our board members. It's the exact same process. So we problem solve together, we brainstorm together, we ask for guidance. I mean, whenever staff sees a challenge or an opportunity,
that's what we take to our quarterly meetings with the Essential Leaders Council and with our advisory board. And we say, here's the strategy question that we're wrestling with, or here's an issue we think we want to make grants focused on, or here are grants we're thinking about. Help us figure this out. Do you know good organizations? Do you know folks who we should talk to? We speak to the Essential Leaders Council the same way we talk to the advisory board. It's the same process. And honestly, some of our most impactful work has come from that process. So we worked with a number of your colleagues at Aspen on a Good Jobs Champions definition. And the definition is unique in the fact that it was signed onto and championed by everyone from companies to labor to workers themselves. And that would not have been possible if we didn't have everyone at the table, but especially workers in essential fields telling us exactly what a good job looks like and what needs to change for jobs to be good.
Thanks, Tianka. Dina, in addition to funding person-centered work, you have talked about the work that you're doing with the LEAP Fellowship. I would love you to tell us a little bit more about next steps and what your vision is for the future.
Yeah, so after 8 years, LEAP is winding down this month, which is a little bittersweet, but in what comes with wind down is sort of the opportunity to reflect on lessons and to think about, what do you want to do next? And so we found ourselves kind of at a crossroads thinking about how do we want to apply the lessons that sort of live within a specific initiative, but how do we think about sort of taking them out and thinking about how they could apply more broadly across our strategies in the Center for Economic Opportunity at Casey. And the LEAP Youth Fellowship is an example of sort of a direct engagement that the foundation does, but we also know that so many of our grantee partners who are doing this work on the ground, are doing so much innovative work. How can we think about really sort of channeling our resources to support and amplify the work that they're doing? So, with those two questions in mind, we realized that we had, those questions, and we actually engaged a consultant really to do what we would call a landscape scan. So we had a consultant interview national partners, local organizations that are leaders in the youth engagement work, youth-led organizations, to hear from them, one, what does innovation look like for them? If they could have funding to do what they wanted to do, like what would that look like? And then the second was sort of what would their priorities be for foundation funding? And so after those interviews took place, there were sort of three themes that came to the fore. So the first was that, if we were to fund innovation, it needs to be defined by folks who are doing the work. They don't want sort of, no Casey sort of issuing an RFP saying do an advisory. It really is about putting organizations, folks on the ground, and young people in the driver's seat with respect to the work. The second piece of advice we received was to recognize that depending on where young people are in their lives, what engagement looks like and what innovation look like will necessarily look different. So if you're looking to engage young workers, that'll look different than if you're engaging students, than if you're engaging young people who've been justice impacted. It'll look different, and so the strategies need to reflect that differentiation. And then the third thing is that so many of the leaders who are doing this work are doing it because they know how important it is for them strategically and how important it is for the young people who are participating in it. But oftentimes that's not reflected in the funding they receive, and that's not reflected in the resources that they get. And so, if you're gonna, I feel like in philanthropy, we're in a unique position to kind of put our money where our mouth is. If we're gonna say that we're gonna fund this, fund this. Yeah. And so, so we got this feedback that was like, okay, well, what we want are things that are bespoke to community and community driven. So how do we go about sort of responding to that? And so what we decided to do across our Center for Economic Opportunity is that we created a pooled fund. So we sort of came together and then invited and issued an RFP that rather than saying sort of implement this project or program, propose to us something that is innovative to you, that is responsive to your goals, your priorities, to the young people you serve and care about most, and to the context that you're operating in. And so we issued this call for proposals and had so many ideas that were sort of way more creative than things that we would ever think to do or ever think to, put out a call, to fund. And so we were lucky that we were able to make 11 grants to organizations that just launched. We just had our kickoff in October. And so we're still very much in a learning phase. And so kind of in the thick of it, but excited to share more as we learn more.
That's incredibly exciting. And I think that kind of encapsulates some of what we've heard across everyone about, and that just requires a level of trust and respect of the people in the communities you are partnering with. That doesn't always happen in philanthropy or in any other field, and a way to be open to the solutions that you are told, not that you go out with, which is exciting. Sarah, as you said in your intro, I'm delighted that you're on stage with us because we don't get to do this sort of partnership often enough. And as I said in the prep call, like one of the reasons we embarked on this was because of you all and the expertise you all brought to bear and the approach you took to the work. And so we're grateful for that. And you all have just recently published a report on practices and recommendations for how to center parent voice in policy. One of the things that you talked about that really stuck with me is how do you emphasize not just telling people stories, but like really taking those recommendations. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that and the set of recommendations you want to highlight for this group.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that Anne and our managing director really focused on early on is how central racial and gender equity is to this work, inclusivity in an intersectional lens. And also, if we are saying that experience is expertise, then we need to pivot from saying, what's your experience, to saying, what do you recommend, right? And that's a simple but really important distinction that needs to be embedded in how we engage with and work with parent leaders. And I think a couple examples to animate it are helpful. So in 2016, as part of our policy and systems change work, Ascend convened a group of early childhood and health leaders across community-based, state, and federal organizations. And we had parent advisors at the table. And one of the things that kept coming up was this window of opportunity that the first 12 months of a child's life is in the pediatrician's office. And we had a number of parents who said that they had been grappling with depression and anxiety, but there was no one who was supporting them in that. And many of these parents are uninsured. And Ascend heard that, and as a follow-up to those convenings, we brought together a smaller group of folks, including at the time the head of enrollment at the Center for Medicaid Services. And she said, I think we can do something about this, and I want to hear more. And what resulted from that engagement and that very intentional approach to policy and systems change was the Obama administration issued an information bulletin to all of the states that had expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, saying that pediatricians in those states could screen, refer, and do initial treatment for parents with depression using the child's billing code. And that is, you can see the through line there, right? From when you hear from parents what not just they're experiencing, but what would they do differently? And, I think elsewhere in Ascend's work, you see it with our fellows and with our network partners. Aisha Nyanduro is nationally known right now for Magnolia Mothers Trust, which is the country's first guaranteed income initiative for Black single mothers. That actually started as her asking those mothers how to use some philanthropic resources. And an initial vision was around a mental health intervention, and they said, no, we want cash, and this is why. And so a central part of the fellowship is creating the conditions for courageous leadership that help people say, I'm going to do something differently, even if the powers that be don't like what they hear or are unsure about it, because this is what we're hearing from families. So I think for Ascend, it's really setting a different table and asking different questions, and then helping leaders and organizations create the conditions to do something about what they hear.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm hoping that after this last round of question, we can take at least one question from the audience. But I want to end with, for our kind of facilitated Q&A, with a question related to an observation I've had from the intros that we had here, which is, I think for you all, the way you've adopted person-centered practices in to some degree comes from your founding. That like when you started, there was someone who said, this was how we're going to do business, right? This is the right way to do it, and we need to bring that voice in. But there are many organizations watching now or that we want to reach for whom that is not part of the initial DNA, right? That this is something that they'll have to adopt new. And I'm wondering if we could go down the line, and Aaron, maybe start with you and come back this way on what is, for organizations who are looking to do this work or deepen their commitment to this work, what is one strategy or approach or principle you'd recommend to either taking that first step or taking a step towards deepening that side of the work?
One practice that I think is really critical and really important is actually bringing all of the people, multi-sector stakeholders, lots of different people together into one room and making sure that they have the space and the container to actually identify problems and problem solve together. And I'm naming this in part because I think it's something that Aspen FSP does exceptionally well. It is so powerful. We are not going to solve these really complex problems with only one person, with only one set of ideas. We need all of the brilliance. It is available to us. And just creating that space, creating the opportunity for people to engage with each other and share ideas is huge.
Thank you. Sarah?
Yeah, so the Parent Voices Guide that I referenced before came out this fall. It's the culmination of a lot of the work that I've been describing. We have 8 principles in it, and it's really hard to choose among them, especially because each begets another, including, compensation and how do organizations understand what the benefits cliff is and how important that is to parents. But one I will just name is building social capital as a way of working with people with lived experience. When Anne started Ascend, one of the key components of the 2-generation approach she really highlighted was social capital as the secret sauce. It's the access to individuals, networks, institutions that help all of us thrive. And so when you create efforts to have feedback loops, mechanisms for partnering with, listening to parent leaders, recognize that those relationships with philanthropic organizations, with policy leaders, that's power, and you want to share that power. And so building cohorts of parents, creating and using technology to keep in touch with people, and recognizing that those relationships are ones to cultivate, I think is really important and often doesn't get the same level of priority as, for example, making sure that there's compensation and making sure that there is safety, that people have autonomy. Those are all incredibly important, but that social capital building, that connectedness, Jessica, you talked about it earlier. I think that is really critical too, to making sure that these relationships between institutions and parents are sustainable.
Thank you, Sarah. Tianka?
One principle I'd elevate is one that I reflect on every day in this work, honestly, and that's be bold. The work is not easy, and it can feel scary. People with lived experience are afraid of not feeling heard, valued, or respected, or safe, as Jessica said. Funders, my institution is a philanthropy, are worried about causing harm and being criticized. But this work is too effective and important for that. You can't always focus on what's safe, what's easy, when you're trying to do what's right and make real change. And that's the piece of advice that I would leave folks, is just be bold in your leadership, be intentional. Think about whether or not your institution can focus the time and the resources to do this directly, or if you should support an organization or group of folks who does it so that you can learn from them.
Thank you, Tianka. Dina?
The recommended practice I would share is to really think intentionally about reciprocal benefit. We're talking about person-centered practices. There is often, someone who's designing what the person-centered practice is, and what is, for all the parties coming to the table, what is the benefit that they're all getting from being around this table. You know, I can sit here and say, doing a fellowship, I know what the benefit is to our work, but when we're thinking about engaging young people, what's the benefit to them? Like, oftentimes the conversation stops with compensation, but really it's, you know, young people, we know they have, you know, I'm always talking in the context of youth and young adults because that's what we focus on, but we know that they have very full, rich, and busy lives. They may be working, in school, parents, like helping out with whatever person-centered project I'm working on at work is like the 5th or 6th priority on their list, you know? And so how do we think about making it something that adds value to their lives that's aligned with the, whether it's personal or professional ambitions that they have for themselves? And to do that requires conversations up front at the beginning and ongoing conversations throughout to make sure that it's still meeting that. And so I would say to just really think intentionally about, you know, what everyone is getting from being a part of this process.
Thank you all. I had aspirationally said that maybe we could take a question, and I was very wrong. But I want you to join me in thanking our great panel for the incredible insights and the work that they're doing in the world right now. For those online in the room, we have one last Slido question. If we could put that up on the screen for folks to weigh in on how you are committing to doing this work. And I want to, as you're doing that, close out with a couple of remarks. First, again, directly as I alluded to before, we can only do this work if we have funding partners who are willing to invest in it and allow us to invest in the leaders that we have brought together through the CAG and other groups. So I want to thank the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, Families and Workers Fund, and the NEKC Foundation for support of this work directly. And for partnering on this. You have heard about the great work they do directly to make sure this is part of their everyday practice. But also all of our funders who fund the work of FSP really in part value us because of this work, and you can find those sponsors on our website. The last thing I want to say is, if I can, a bit of a personal reflection on this. I also come to this work in part because of my personal experiences. My mom was a Vietnamese refugee who ended up settling in poor rural West Virginia to a coal mining family and experiencing both the racism and the economic hardship that comes from that. And that is in part why I'm here in DC trying to do policy work to create systems change and change the lives of people for the better. But my own experience in that space is that I think most people who come to DC and work in the institutions that we have such trouble working with and getting to do the right thing came to that work for similar reasons. They wanted to change the world. But there is something about that I've experienced personally that takes that part of you that knows how to do this work right and chews it up and spits it out. And there has been no better solve for me to be re-inspired to do this work right than having our CAG, than doing this person-centered work the right way, than being in relationship. And so if you have questions about why you ought to do that, I just offer that as one more. So thank you all for joining us in person and online. Thank you all, our speakers, our community advisory group, and everyone else who's been a part of this. And we hope that you take this and join us in the next steps for taking this sort of work to the rest of the world.